It's a very interesting story that he just shared with me. Am I at liberty to share it? Okay, so I just asked him as to, I know his surname is Dhuddu. So half the time in our office, we were discussing whether it is Duddu or Duddu. So I just went and asked Rajesh, how do I pronounce this? So he said, it's Duddu. You know what Duddu in Kannada is? Does anybody know what Duddu is? Money. So he's the Mr. Money Man here. Should I call him Mr. Moneybags? Uncle Scrooge? Okay, so the story is like this, that apparently his ancestors were in the court of Krishna Dev Raya, and they were the money men then. So whenever the king wanted money, he used to say, oh, call the Dudu men. So that's how the surname came up. Right, Rajesh?
Absolutely.
Right, and welcome to you.
Thank
the
you.
stage is all yours. And
Thank
he's
you.
here to speak on the machine learning, the blockchain, and whatnot that everybody's talking about. Over to you.
Sure.
Okay, so Rajesh, they want your mobile number as well.
When I got into the blockchain space about 2 years back and then started dealing with Bitcoin and the others, my cousins thought that I was a reincarnation of some of our ancestors because it also deals with money, but in the new age format. So they think that it's natural for me to get into the Bitcoin space. Before I get into the details of the session, I think we have about an hour for this particular session. I just wanted to understand in terms of what's the kind of background that this audience, the lovely audience here, have with regards to blockchain, so that then I'll cover some of the basics as well. Excuse me for saying this, whichever forum I go to in different parts of the world, people ask for basics of blockchain and the fundamentals because they wanted to clarify a few things. So I thought it's fair on my part to just to do a fundamental check, not to evaluate your respective knowledge, but just to do a fundamental check. Can we have a show of hands, please? How many of you know about blockchain fully? I'm not talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin and blockchain are completely different, though Bitcoin is the first commercial application of blockchain. So from a blockchain perspective, how many of you are familiar with blockchain? No, I'm not referring to cryptocurrency. I'm referring to the underlying technology, the distributed ledger technology. Not many hands, I think. That's perfectly fine. So in terms of, before getting into what blockchain is, why blockchain becomes important in these days is a lot of people are attributing it to immutability, something which cannot be changed, something which cannot be altered and stuff like that. So before that, some prelude. This slide is very familiar to you. I don't have to explain. This is the landscape of cyber risk. We see a lot of attacks. We see distributed denial of services and the recent incident of WannaCry, and also a correlation with Bitcoin because the WannaCry attackers demanded money in the form of Bitcoins. And then if we see in terms of the 10 biggest data breaches of all time, recently there was a domain name registration network called DYN, D-Y-N, that went down. And we have also heard about impacts on, in terms of some of the leading players like Sony PlayStation, where the user details have been stolen. And when the user details were stolen, they were not 1 or 2 user details. The user details were stolen in millions. And then we had the target attack and stuff like that. So if this is the landscape that we are in currently, can blockchain offer a silver bullet to overcome these kind of challenges, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to information theft and stuff like that? But to understand that, the good thing is, yes, it has a potential to overcome some of the challenges that we are facing in the cybersecurity space, especially with loss of information, loss of personal information, which we call in the financial terms the personally identifiable information, PII, and stuff like that. But how does blockchain help us to handle that or to address that? For that, when I was invited, I thought we should talk about decoding blockchain, because if we don't decode blockchain, we will not be able to understand the ability of blockchain to help us to handle the risks in the cyberspace. So from that perspective, if we look at what constitutes a blockchain, it's basically hash. The fundamental, the minute grain of a blockchain is called as an hash. This hash came into existence through a protocol called SHA. It stands for Secured Hash Algorithm. And this secured hash algorithm are in various versions. There is a 256, there is a 384, and there is a 5112. So let's see what is this secured hash algorithm. Secured hash algorithm basically says that you can input any information. You can input entire Britannica encyclopedia into that particular hash function, and it produces a fixed output, which is called as the hash, and then it has a 32 characters. So you can put, even if you put one character, it produces an output, a hash of 32 characters length. Even if you put Britannica encyclopedia, it still produces a 32 length output. You can put music, you can put files, you can put any content that goes into it. Now that particular hash represents the fingerprint of the data. And what happens is, if we change even a small component in it, even a small character, I will demonstrate that to you in a short while, then the hash changes completely. So when you are looking at a hash which holds a particular data, and when the data gets transmitted, and if the hash changes, it naturally tells you that the data has been tampered with. That's because, as I said, in terms of even if you change a small character, the complete nature of the hash changes. And hash changes in a completely unpredictable way. You can't predict how the hash changes. And you may ask, okay, by looking at a hash, can I decipher what data it carries? It's technically impossible to decipher what data it carries. So I'll do a small demo. Can we open this link, please? You can copy and paste it. We have some technology challenges. It's quite ironical. In a new age technology we face, I mean, a topic that deals with new age technology, we have some technological challenges in terms of opening the slide. So here, can you just type, if you don't mind, the audience here are awesome. I hope it's correct.
What do I type?
The audience here are awesome. The audience here are awesome. And then just go down, please. No, yeah, just go down. Yeah, then say calculate hash. So this is a hash that got created. So you have this is a 32 character length. It starts with F275B08. I'll not get into the complete details of it, and ends with 9873A. Padma, can you put a apostrophe at the end and recalculate the hash? Exclamatory mark, sorry. Yeah, and then calculate the hash. See, the hash changed. Hash has completely changed by just putting an exclamatory mark. So it gives you a trail to say if somebody has changed the data or if somebody has tampered data. This is a very simple illustration. Think about Britannia Encyclopedia, which is put, and somebody puts an IP for distribution of the Britannia Encyclopedia, and you know that it refers to the same hash. For example, in the same example, if we remove the exclamatory mark and then calculate the hash, it goes back to the same hash. So you are able to compare. So when you think about digital assets that get distributed on the internet, and if you want to see if somebody has unauthorized access to it, or if they have changed the content, or somebody who does not have access to the IP has changed the content, then you will be able to figure out. So that's the fundamental example of, I mean, that's just an example of hash. Now let's go back to the presentation, please. So if, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
how do you differentiate an authorized and an unauthorized change?
Yeah, so basically what happens is it depends on how the blockchain is configured. You have two different implementations of blockchain. One is a public blockchain and the second one is a private blockchain. In a public blockchain, those who control the hash power, they can change it. But if they change it, it leaves a trail as to who has changed it. In private, since it is a private blockchain network, you need to have specific access controls to make the change. Through that, you should be able to figure out how the audit trail and the nature of changes to the information. You're welcome. So that is the hash. Then comes the block. To understand the block concept, I'll go back to Bitcoin. As I said, it is the first application of blockchain in the world. When Bitcoin was written by a person called Satoshi Nakamoto, nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. It's a pseudonym. He wrote the code in a C++ kind of an algorithm using an open source platform. And the code has been written in such a manner that every 10 minutes a block gets created. And the next 10 minutes another block gets created. And when a block gets created and another block gets created, the new block is interlinked to the old block. And hashes are contained in the blocks. So assume that a hash has been created using whatever simple expression that we used, and then it gets embedded in block number 1, and then it gets linked to block number 2, it gets linked to block number 3. Now if somebody wants to go and change the data of block 1, since it is linked to block 2 and block 3, it becomes extremely difficult to change the data. And that's the chain it is forming. Since it is forming a chain of blocks, it's technically called as blockchain. But if you see it in the even more technical terms, it is called as the distributed ledger technology. So if the data and the hashes don't match, what does it indicate? What does it indicate if the data and the hashes don't match? That means somebody has tampered the data. So these two fundamentals are very important as we move along. So please carry these two fundamentals with you, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and I can take those questions. So before that, I'm introducing, before we move forward, I'm introducing you to a few more concepts which have become very important as we understand how we can use blockchain to fight threats in the cybersecurity space. Can we play this video? It's on the Chrome.
A hash is a one-way function that has multiple uses in blockchain and decentralized systems. All digital media, like documents, movies, or music, are just strings of binary digits, ones and zeros. A hash function takes any digital media and runs an algorithm on it to produce a fixed length and unique digital output known as a hash. This fixed length output is normally much smaller than the original input. Every time the same digital media is put through the hash function, it produces the exact same digital output or hash. When even just a single bit of data in the digital media is changed and then put through the hash function, the digital output, the hash, is completely different to the original one. The mathematics behind the hash function ensures that there is no way to derive the original digital media content from its generated hash, thus making the hash function one way. In a blockchain, the notion of mining requires miners to solve a problem with a known partial input derived from the latest state of the blockchain to create a hash target. The miners must try to guess the digital input that can create the hash target, thus solving the problem. As a hash is one way, the miners must try many combinations of input to create the hash target and solve the problem, which uses up a computer's resources like CPU and memory. The first miner to answer the problem wins. Merkle trees are an essential part of a blockchain for data integrity. Each block in the blockchain can contain multiple transactions which each contain data. In this example, there are 4 transactions, TX1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of the 4 transactions' data is passed through a hash function, generating 4 unique hashes, one for each transaction. Pairs of hashes are then combined and passed through the hash function again. This process generates 2 separate and unique hashes, which are each based upon the combination of 2 hashes relating to 2 transactions. The 2 hashes are then combined and passed through the hash function again. This results in a single root hash forming a complete Merkle tree. The Merkle tree allows for the detection of any changes to any data within the transactions of a block by simply rerunning through the process for each transaction and comparing the results to the original root hash. Get in touch to find out about our blockchain-based solutions and services.
So this video is a summary of what I told you about the fundamentals of blockchain so far, but it does introduce you to one more concept called mining. Remember the example that I mentioned to you, every 10 minutes a block gets created by the algorithm. Nobody knows where the block exists. And these blocks are all use transfer connection protocol and internet protocol, TCP IP. This is nothing but you ping them, right? Your computer has a TCP IP address, your website has a TCP IP address, and it's all being converted into text. But at the back end, it's all internet protocols. So when these blocks get created, especially in a public blockchain network like a Bitcoin, each block contains 10 Bitcoins. No, today it's about 12.5 Bitcoins. And each Bitcoin today is valued at $3,000 and upwards. So it's about $360,000 that get created in the block, and the person has to find where the block is. That is why it's technically called as mining. As you mine wealth, it's technically called as mining, and once you find that particular block, they ask you they pose mathematical problems in terms of calculating the hash value, and once whoever solves that mathematical function, that person gains ownership of that particular block. Technically, that person gets ownership of $360,000. Maths can be very, very remunerative. I wish I had known that in my school, right? So that's about the Bitcoin network. Now let's move forward. So this slide is a little busy slide, but what it basically says is, if you look at the block in a blockchain, it basically has a technical data, it has a previous block hash, we covered that. Then it has a Merkle root, you understood what is a Merkle root in the video. Then it has a timestamp when that particular block has been created. Then it has a difficulty target. Remember in the end of the video she said that people recalculate the hash values by solving complex mathematical problems. And then it has another reference called nonce. This is how a blockchain data looks. I just wanted to give you a perspective. We don't need to memorize this, or we don't need to remember it fully to understand the application of blockchain from a cybersecurity and ability to protect the cyber threats perspective. So I'll again retouch upon the immutability aspect. Now let's take one thing. Let's take an example. We take the entire Bitcoin network. By the way, Bitcoin network or Ethereum network, these are all written on open source platform. If you go to GitHub, GitHub, you have the complete code of a Bitcoin. You have a complete code of Ethereum. You can create your own cryptocurrency by using that particular code. But things are becoming little complicated. When Bitcoin started, it had 4,000 lines of code. Today it has 1 lakh lines of code. That means the network is increasing faster and faster. And Bitcoin till date has supported $50 trillion in transaction value, and it was not hit even once. Yeah, there were Bitcoins that were stolen from the exchanges, but those Bitcoins were stolen from the exchanges because of compromisation of the surrounding systems. in terms of a compromisation of a server, compromisation of access to that particular exchange, but it was not because of compromisation of the underlying Bitcoin technology. So if $50 trillion of transaction has already been processed on this network, which is out there in the open, it is worth today $40 billion. Can't we use that technology to meet our requirements? And that technology has solved what we call as a trust gap. A trust gap, it has basically solved that trust gap in the financial services space. Can we use the same technology to solve the trust gap in the Internet of Things or in the connected devices space? I'll come to that in a minute, but this is how it happens, the immutability aspects. You take the entire blockchain code or the Bitcoin code, and then it has about, let's say, it has about nearly 500,000 blocks, and we take the transaction away from 300,000 block. When the transaction is taken away from the 300,000 block, what happens technically? The next block fails, because we said it's all interlinked, right? So the next block fails, and since we have taken away one block, what happens to the hash value of that block or that network? It changes completely. And when it changes completely, we know that something is incorrect with this particular hash value, or rather something is incorrect with the content that has gone into the hash value, and it is technically not possible to rebuild the entire blockchain. So that is what gives you the concept of immutability, which is very required today in the global landscape, in the global business, or in the cybersecurity space. So now let's understand how blockchain can empower cybersecurity. It can block identity theft. It can prevent data tampering. We already know how it prevents data tampering, and it will stop denial of service attacks. Today, the major problem in the world is DDoS, and all of you know about DDoS. It is distributed denial of service, and when the malware, what is distributed denial of service? When the malware comes in tons and tons of quantities in multiple sources and attacks one common point of infrastructure. So once you start addressing one aspect, the other malware starts. Once you start addressing that, the other malware starts. But it's all focused on a common infrastructure, which means there is a single point of failure. So from an identity theft perspective, how does it solve? Let me give you an example. There are two individuals seated here. This individual's phone wants to speak to that individual's phone. What happens? When this phone connects to that phone, it connects automatically, because they get what is called as a certificate, which is issued by a centralized party, CA, Certificate Authority. Some of you may be familiar with companies like Entrust, which will give you that certificate, and you implement that certificate within the organization, and when the devices start working with an organization, they interpret that certificate and they talk to the other device. Now what happens is, don't get me wrong, how do you know that his phone was not involved in a malware incident? How do you know that his phone does not have a spyware on the phone? And you are automatically connecting that device with another device. And when we have questions of this nature, that's when it causes what we call as trust gap. So how can these devices trust each other? So what they are planning to do, we have what is called as a public key infrastructure. This public key infrastructure is ported on a blockchain network. So this blockchain network tracks in terms of all the devices, the public key associated with those devices from the point it came into existence. And they compare, once it comes into the network, they compare. For example, I did a masterclass for the Dubai government last May in Dubai, and I was speaking to some of the government officers over there who specialize in the cybersecurity space. And what happens is, in Dubai, it's the largest transit airport in the world. And what happens when you have a transit flight to catch and you're at airport? You're Facebooking, or you're talking to people on Skype, that means you get connected. You're using the internet in that particular land. Now, how does Dubai government ensure that this particular device is okay to trust with? Because they're going to come and stay in that country for a short span of time, 4 hours, 5 hours, and they're going to go away. And God only knows when they will come back, when they will get connected in the same ecosystem. Now what happens is this guy comes, populates the spyware, and then leaves. Or he or she is responsible for originating a DDoS attack, and then he leaves. So today we don't have any means of validating a device. It is assumed that trust is implicit, but trust in these days is not implicit. We need a infrastructure, we need a technology to ensure that the devices can be trusted, and blockchain has the capability to give you that kind of a solution. So what they are doing, ever since a connected device comes into their land, they created what is, or in the process of creating what they call as nano block. And this nano block will keep a trail of all the devices that have come over a period of time. When did it come? What kind of a make? Where did it last connected? Where did it last disconnected? So that they are keeping a data trail of all these devices, so that if there is some suspected activity, they not only go back to the person, but they can also go back to the device of the person. Now this technology has been developed in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and they came up with a coin called CERT coin. What CERT coin does, when two devices get connected, they exchange this particular coin, and this coin, exchange of this coin is used as a basis of establishing trust. And we have various other examples, but before that I would like to show you another video about a company called IOTA and how they are using this concept to track all the devices. In the video, word of caution, they will say that their technology is advanced to blockchain. They have bypassed some of the aspects of creation of a block, but they are using the underlying technology DLT, distributed ledger technology. One second. Distributed ledger technology. Obviously, they are calling it is more advanced than blockchain because they want to get the analysts excited, so the valuation of the company goes up. Let's leave that aside, but let's look at the underlying technology. Yeah, now we can.
Is defined as the growing network of connected devices that are capable of collecting and exchanging data. This network will allow for direct integration of the physical world into the digital realm and will soon enable smart grids, virtual power plants, smart homes, intelligent transportation, and smart cities. A true machine-to-machine economy will emerge as devices are able to transact and communicate with one another. IBM predicts that the Internet of Things will be comprised of 50 billion connected devices by 2020, and Gartner estimates the economic benefit to be $2 trillion in just a few years' time. But all of these predictions are dependent upon the emergence of a transactional backbone that is secure, infinitely scalable, affordable, and lightweight enough to be integrated into sensors and actuators. This is where IOTA enters the fray. IOTA is a permissionless, open-source distributed ledger that was built from the ground up to solve these very problems. It was specifically designed to serve as the backbone for the Internet of Things. Instead of using a blockchain, IOTA created a revolutionary new protocol called the Tangle. The Tangle's unprecedented innovation makes IOTA the only infinitely scalable, quantum-proof payment and secure data transfer platform on planet Earth. With zero transaction fees, modularity, mask-authenticated messaging, and an immutable ledger all available via an extremely lightweight client, IOTA is uniquely positioned to serve as the settlement layer within the Internet of Things stack. But don't be fooled by IOTA's initial focus on the IoT. Yes, it was born out of necessity to enable the Internet of Things, but IOTA can eventually be a universal settlement solution within any domain that selects for zero transaction fees, enormous scalability, and swift transaction finality. Learn more at iota.org.
Okay. So what the person was saying, there are about 50 billion connected devices, and that's only in the US context, 50 billion. For a country less than half a billion population, about 400 million I think is the population of US, and then they perform trade worth of $2 trillion. And we are going to go in that particular direction, especially with IoT becoming more prominent. A connected washing machine can order detergent powder by itself. Your phone can order a car by itself. We're getting there. It's not out of a science fiction movie or something of that nature. This is a reality. And when we get there, then the need to validate those connected devices become a lot more important. So they came with Tangle, which is a technology. They bypass the concept of creating a block. That means the example that I told you, every 10 minutes a block gets created. Here the block doesn't get created, but the underlying concept is the distributed ledger technology, and the DLT is going to archive all the information about the connected devices. And once you have the information, then you can do all your analysis, right? So if you don't have information, then you can't do any analysis. So that is what they are trying to capture, and also trying to protect identity and also prevent identity theft. An interesting application, another application that came up is a company by name Factom. Factom is also creating a global ledger, or rather a US ledger of all the connected devices. Now these connected devices are very important. US has borders with Mexico, US has borders with Canada. I hope this doesn't get recorded by anybody. They don't have any problem with Canada, but they have a lot of problem with Mexico, right? They don't care in terms of what happens on the border of Canada, but they may care what happens with the border of Mexico. And they have installed all the spy cameras on the border. Now what happens if somebody gains control of this spy camera remotely and changes the nature of that particular spy camera? It's not recording stuff that is supposed to record, and it is out there in the wild. It's out there, right? Anybody can access it because it's a connected device and you can access it. So how does one ensure that this particular device is not compromised, especially by the spies from the neighboring countries? So the homeland of US had no solution for this, and they had one startup incubator. I mean, they organized a challenge in a startup incubator, and then they came across this company called Factom. I think they have invested in that company now close to several $1 million. The homeland of US has invested. They're doing very simple thing. They're creating a ledger. The ledger has details of all this spyware that has been installed across the boundary of United States. It will tell you who is the manufacturer, what kind of security update it has, what kind of a software it has, how long has it been connected, if its software or version has been updated, who has updated, and when it was updated. And by virtue of that information, they are able to detect if their instruments on the border are compromised or not compromised. And similarly, people are developing some other technologies like keyless signature structure. I will not get into details, it's a lot more technical. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up with newer versions using the same underlying technology and the underlying philosophy to make things a lot more secure. And there's also another company called GEM, which is kind of using it for exchange of healthcare information in United States. Some of you would know that healthcare information in United States is subject to very stringent regulation, which is HIPAA. And if anybody violates HIPAA, they are subjected to millions and millions of dollars of fine. And now let's take that at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, now the government is saying healthcare organizations should give portability of health information to the people. That means as a patient, I should be able to share my health information securely with my insurance company, because all bills are paid by the insurance company, with the physician, with the healthcare organization where the physician works, and with my family members, and without being compromised. It's quite challenge. Today, if you see, the most valuable information on the darknet is the healthcare records of US citizens. If you go to darknet, there are lots of people who are selling healthcare information of US citizens, and it's most valuable information. I don't know what is the value, but it's the most valuable information. And that's how they want to come up with measures to overcome those kind of data breaches. Then comes the DDoS attacks. I told you DDoS is like they come in large quantities, multiple avenues, but attack a single infrastructure. So some intelligent person thought about why should we keep it as a single common point of infrastructure? Why don't we distribute that infrastructure across the network so that even if one point of access or one node, as they are technically called, goes down, the other nodes are still active. So now people are working utilizing blockchain technology to develop protections to overcome the DDoS kind of effects. For example, domain name service. Remember I mentioned about DIN, which was one of the major organization which registers the domain names, and when it was attacked, Twitter was down, Instagram was down, and a lot of social media sites who have registered their domains with DIN were down. So this guy came with an approach saying that why should I keep all the domain names under one single infrastructure? I can distribute these domain names across using a blockchain network, and if one element of the blockchain network goes down, the others are functional. So there is minimization of a single point of failure. So they're coming up with various protocols. The most commonly used protocol in the blockchain world today is Ethereum. Ethereum was developed by a 21-year-old kid called Vitalik Buterin. It's worth about $20 billion today. They have developed this Ethereum by studying Bitcoin and trying to plug in the gaps that are there in Bitcoin. The advantage of Ethereum is Ethereum has what is called as an Ethereum virtual machine, Ethereem virtual machine, EVM, and using EVM you can develop applications on Ethereum. So they are developing fantastic applications like smart contracts. Smart contract is two computers can speak to each other, interpret a contract language without the need for lawyers, and they can auto execute the contract, auto support the contract and stuff like that. I work with some companies in Singapore and they're writing capital tables on smart contracts and various other things. You know, it's really fascinating in terms of what they're doing. I will not get into the details because it's a different subject. But as I said, they're using Ethereum blockchain, and there's another concept called interplanetary file system, IPFS, which is an alternate to HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, and they're using this interplanetary file system and the blockchain protocol to make businesses on the cyber world a lot more secure. So I know most of you are information security practitioners, and I think in your own world you follow some of the models like CIA security triad model, I don't know, some of you may be following, and AAA model, which basically says confidentiality, integrity and availability should be protected. Authentication, authorization, audit and non-repudiation means which somebody can't go back and change what somebody has agreed for, that is non-repudiation. All that has to be protected, and blockchain in its initial stages of evolution as it is currently has demonstrated a significant potential to meet all this criteria from an information security perspective. And then from an IoT perspective, there's another company called Filament. You may want to look up for this company. They're also trying to develop a lot of applications using the blockchain technology to make the IoT space a lot more secure and dependable. Finally, I don't think blockchain is a silver bullet to solve all the problems, but it did demonstrate itself as a powerful tool. So, you know, there's a lot of potential to leverage this powerful tool and to solve some of the problems that we are facing today in a connected world. I know blockchain usually gets referred to its applications in financial services and cryptocurrency space. Some of you may have invested in bitcoins, and then you must have laughed back to the bank because Bitcoin has appreciated significantly. But that is not the only application that blockchain can support. So this is a world which is very close to you. The fact that you are in this session, I presume that it is close to you. So from that perspective, you have seen how blockchain can help you to protect information security and make cyber world a lot more secure and dependable space. That's all I thought I will share with you, so that you get a perspective of how it can help you to navigate the risks in the cyber world. And I wrote that the audience is awesome here. So if you have some good questions for me, it validates my phrase about the audience. Sorry? That's a very good question. I expected it. So you are the one who invested in Bitcoins, right? Okay. So the way to buy Bitcoins in India, India operates little differently compared to the rest of the Bitcoin exchanges in the world. Our guys are very fascinated about Aadhaar and know your customer. So in India, there are 4 exchanges: ZPay, Unocoin, CoinSecure, and another one. These are all the exchanges which are registered not under SEBI, but they are registered under the Registrar of Companies. You can go to this exchange. It's an online exchange. You can download their app. Their apps are available on Play Store as well as an App Store. And once you download the app, you give your KYC documents. No brainer, they ask for Aadhaar. Everybody asks for Aadhaar these days. So they ask for Aadhaar, they ask for your PAN card, and they ask for your banking information. And once it's all been set up, you can transfer funds through NEFT, IMPS, or RTGS to that particular wallet. And once the wallet is loaded, you can buy and sell Bitcoins. To put things in perspective, it's becoming very prominent. In India, 150 Bitcoins are traded every day. It's equivalent to 150 at $3,000 each. It's equivalent to roughly about $500,000 of trade that is happening every day. And there are about 700,000 active users, and most of them are politicians. Bitcoin is not regulated at this point of time. So what is happening is, one, RBI, the governor Raghuram Rajan wanted to come up with some regulations, but you know what has happened to him. So unfortunately, he couldn't stay back till the regulation has been brought in place. Now what is happening is, Arun Jaitley has constituted a committee. Under that committee, they're trying to see how they can regulate Bitcoins. Now what they are saying is, you can invest in Bitcoins, but IT department is saying that we cannot consider it as a capital gain. Because generally, in securities, if you invest in securities, if you get a gain, it can be either a short-term capital gain or a long-term capital gain. So they are not clear under what provisions. So they have asked you to disclose your Bitcoin holding voluntarily. And if you have some extra, and those of you who file ITR in excess of 50 lakhs, nothing can be hidden in India, right? So basically they're saying voluntarily you disclose that, and then voluntarily you say that you have gained so much and pay tax under 33% or whatever is the bracket. And of course now the fact that all these exchanges have your PAN cards, IT guys may come back and then they may ask you what is your holding, because if they go to exchange, the exchange will tell them how many Bitcoins are held against the PAN number. So to answer your question shortly, they're not regulated at this point of time, but regulation will come very, very soon. Okay, that's a good question. So cryptocurrency is issued by a software program, unlike currency which is issued by a central bank. So it is neither a commodity nor a currency in its truest sense. It's a digital asset. And that digital asset is helping you to exchange something either in the digital world or in the offline world. So it's an exchange of value. Sure. Right. You can use Bitcoin in multiple perspectives. In India, not many merchants are accepting Bitcoins. We have developed, I mean, some of these young guys who founded Zeppay, CoinSecure, they're developing that ecosystem. But Bitcoin today in the global context, you can use Bitcoin to buy content on Apple. You can buy softwares on Microsoft. You can order stuff on Amazon and pay in Bitcoins. In India, Airtel and Vodafone will let you buy mobile recharge. But since it is so volatile, the cost of buying recharge in Bitcoins is higher than cost of buying it in the currency, because it is it's changing randomly. But you may ask in terms of why people are investing, in that case, why people are investing in Bitcoins. So basically, when these connected devices get into commerce, and for example, my connected device does, let's say, a 2 rupee equivalent of a transaction. A connected device does a transaction. It buys something on the internet on its own and then does a 2 rupee worth of transaction. Today, the cost of paying that through payment gateway is far in excess of rupees 2 rupees. Whereas you can pay that through a cryptocurrency, and the advantage of a cryptocurrency are they are divisible by number of times. So Bitcoin can be divisible up to 10 to the power of -8, the smallest unit. So it's in fractions. And that is what IoT and the commerce in the connected world requires, because you want to do multiple transactions, small value transactions. And then, I'll give you an example. Let's say back in your home, if somebody in your family wants to buy game currency, right? We have played Farmville and all that stuff. I didn't buy manure. I thought it was stupid to buy manure on Farmville, which itself was a artificial game. But I know lots of my friends bought manures on Farmville, and then they used to make transactions of 100 rupees, 200 rupees, 300 rupees, and then the cost of transaction was very expensive. See, I'm kind of trivializing a little bit, but so that you can relate to that example. So that's how it works.
You said somebody needs to buy Bitcoin as opposed to the exchanges.
Right.
You have to also provide your KYC.
Right.
So which means the exchanges would have 1%.
Exactly. Only Indian exchanges.
Okay, so not the other currencies.
No, not the other currencies. So today,
why in darknet they're not able to trace?
Not really. So basically, yeah, you're right. In terms of in darknet, you can trace where the Bitcoin has come from and how that Bitcoin has moved, because that audit trail is completely available. But who is doing it? Relating it to the person is not possible.
We just heard from the news that only recently WannaCry Bitcoin and other
Exactly. So the way it happens is that's why all the governments are a little cagey about the Bitcoin. For example, let's say you buy 100,000 equivalent of Bitcoin, $100,000. Then what you can do is from your Zeppay account, you can transfer it to any offline wallet anywhere in the world. And it happens in a fraction of seconds. Once you have moved the money into your offline wallet, maybe that's a US wallet, UK wallet, Philippines wallet, Singapore wallet, then you can move the money anywhere in the world with very, very little transaction fees. Yeah, and trail also. You will leave the transaction trail, but you will not leave the individual trail behind it. Yeah. So as expected, it's going in the cryptocurrency direction. So basically, the valuation, one, it's a function of demand and supply, but there's also an input cost to it. Today, if you see the Bitcoin network, I said, currently there are about 15 million Bitcoins that are in circulation. By 2140, they get to 21 million, and beyond that, they will not get produced. So 21 million, like gold, it is limited in its supply. Now all this Bitcoin network, the transactions has to be validated by the network participants, and that requires a lot of computing power. So someone did a evaluation. The computing power that is required to run Bitcoin network today is equal to 4 supercomputers. 4 computers which exceed the capacity of a Watson, IBM Watson. So somebody is investing in those computing power. And since they are investing in the computing power, the price, the input factor is going up. But most of speculation is happening. The input factor, it's like any stock, right? If you find a stock that has a bull run, if you do your fundamentals, technical analysis or fundamental analysis, or based on earnings per share, you will arrive at a book value of the share. But the market price is several times higher than the book value of the share. In a similar concept, the input price is so much, but the market price is far in excess. One, because people think there are only 21 million, so let me get hold of that. And those people who bought Bitcoin in 2010, it was 10 cents each. It's $3,000 today. And in Bitcoin world, there's a guy by name Bitcoin Jesus. If you Google him, Bitcoin Jesus has 2 million Bitcoins. And why is he called as Jesus? If anybody goes to him and tells him that they are founding a company in the blockchain space or a cryptocurrency space, he gives Bitcoins. He likes the idea. He's like a venture capitalist without any expectations. He's gifted people hundreds and hundreds of Bitcoins to promote their businesses. So they are early movers into this particular space. I'm proud to say there's a guy called Vinny Lingam. If you see the Bitcoin community, Vinny Lingam is very, very popular. He's an Indian. And then the Facebook twins, who didn't win the case against Mark Zuckerberg, they're the Bitcoin billionaires today. They've invested in Bitcoin. So there are people who have moved early into the space and they've started investing. And it's also becoming more and more prominent because Japan has legalized Bitcoins. Today you can pay for public transport in Bitcoins. A lot of countries where the inflation is too high and where the cost of circulating cash is very high and where the cost of transacting plastic money is very high, they are investing either in Bitcoin or an equivalent of that cryptocurrency. Yes?
Yeah, let's see if we can navigate from currency to security.
Absolutely.
Going back to the beginning of the discussion wherein we were talking about hash being created to protect certain type of data, I noticed that a lot of that is data that is pertaining to individual security.
Right.
Are there any attempts to actually use it at an organization or a corporate level? That is part one.
Right.
And from the corporate side, was there any kind of resistance to that kind of an idea, especially with data protection, etc.?
Very good questions. So in terms of, it is not only used in the public domain, it's also used in the private domain. For example, the Homeland example that I gave you about Factom and Filament and where they're creating a ledger of all the IoT devices. If a Homeland Services in United States adopts it, it means it has to be like completely foolproof and safe and stuff like that. So we've seen some implementations of that. A lot of organizations are also doing it. Since it's in the early stages, most of them are in the stealth mode. But a lot of organizations are doing it from a data protection. And also another example, there's a lady called Imogen Heap. Imogen Heap is a very famous singer. And every time she comes with an album, it gets pirated. And she's losing millions of dollars as royalty revenues. So what she did, she went and released her latest album on the blockchain network so that she knows in terms of where it is being compromised, how it is being compromised and stuff like that. So we're seeing adoption of such particular use cases. Resistance is more from an individual perspective. This reminds me when I was in New York in 2010. This was when cloud was coming in newly. And then I had met a CIO. I'll not name the company. I'll be under trouble if I name the CIO. So we ran into a lot of debate about cloud. So I knew that he just returned from vacation. So I asked him, hey XYZ, I would really love to see your vacation photographs. Where are they? Go to Instagram. They are there. Or see my Facebook. They are there. So I asked him, for your personal adoption, you're using cloud, you're using Instagram, you're using Facebook, but when it comes to organizational context, you're saying cloud is insecure. So that dichotomy in terms of approach is causing a little bit of a resistance. So this is exactly where cloud was. If you have spoken to some of the leading CIOs and you ask them about cloud 5-6 years ago, they had different perspectives about cloud. They said cloud is not safe, cloud is not here. The truth is their roles will get decimated or their roles will get marginalized. The same thing is happening with blockchain adoption as well. But I am happy to state to you that every major organization in the world today is doing something or the other. It just doesn't get reported. And it got a major fillip when Bill Gates openly acknowledged the importance of blockchain. Today, Microsoft Azure comes with a pre-built blockchain stack called Ethereum. They're supporting Ethereum, and IBM is supporting Hyperledger. So lots of stuff is happening. How are we doing on the time? One question, and then we'll. Yes. Yeah, can you speak into the mic, please?
Yeah, so blockchain mechanism, the infrastructure being a mechanism for trusted transactions as well.
Right.
Let's say if the adoption catches up, what sort of future do you see for compliances or assurance sort of work? Because then your cyber resilience, privacy to a large extent is already taken care of.
So from a compliance perspective, it makes things a lot more easy from a compliant perspective. Today, the compliance also is not very easy because the information is disparate. There is no free flow of information. Moment there is no free flow of information, you will by nature get into reconciliation. And when you are getting into reconciliation, the compliance aspects surrounding that become a lot more tricky and intricate. So when it becomes open, when it kind of technically removes the concept of reconciliation, from a compliance perspective, it becomes easy, provided the regulations promote it. But if the regulations don't promote it, then it becomes counterintuitive and counterproductive. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. That was quite an interactive session, and I would request Vikrant to give away Rajesh a small token of appreciation, please.